would like to get information about your organization. What is Links and what's the purpose of this organization?
Links was established in 1997. Its aim is to support processes aimed at helping resolution of conflicts in different parts of the world, as well as support for the process of transition towards democracy in emerging societies. Most of our work over the last 15, 16 years has been focused on the Caucasus region and on wider issues connected with European security.
What's the main of your opinion about the security challenges in South Caucasus region?
Well, the region obviously finds itself these days at the center of different processes going on in the world. It's also geographically very strategically placed between Europe and Asia and Europe and the Middle East. This has been historically the case, of course, forever, and this is why the region has a rich history of interaction with different empires over the years. But the big difference now is that we have 3 independent South Caucasus countries. And the first 20 years of independence for these countries was really a struggle to ensure that they continue existing. So it was a struggle for existence. And I would say that this struggle lasted until perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, because now I think everybody understands that the statehood of Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia is not there to be challenged. And the challenge for the countries themselves, therefore, is how to ensure that in the future they will be able to sustain their own security and working with others to achieve that. Now, the interesting thing is that the 3 countries have chosen 3 completely different ways. So Georgia, for a long time, has said that it wants its future to be with Europe and embedded within the North Atlantic Alliance, NATO. Armenia, from early on, said that it wanted to remain a close ally of Russia, and it is already a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Azerbaijan has been developing a foreign policy that is multipolar, but also significantly, a few years ago, it formally joined the non-aligned movement. So it is a non-aligned country. Now, some people have great respect for these 3 views. In Europe, in NATO, there is no problem with the 3 countries choosing these 3 different roads. Perhaps there are others who do not share this view. One of the biggest challenges to the countries concerned is that Russia seems to think that it can dictate what foreign policy directions these 3 countries take, and so it has been very hostile, for example, to Georgia trying to become a member of NATO. I think the position in the international community widely is that independent countries have the right to form their own foreign policy, and it is nobody's business to interfere in those choices. It's up to the country concerned. NATO has never protested to Armenia because it is a member of the CSTO, and neither should Russia protest to Georgia if it wishes to join NATO.
What do you think about the future influence of Russia to this region? What's your prediction? Because after the Crimea crisis, Russia, you said about that, try to dictate to this region. What's your prediction? And also, it's interesting for me that Western community will protect this region from Russia or not.
Well, let's take this bit by bit, because it's a big question. I think Russia will always have a lot of interests in the South Caucasus simply because it is a neighbor. It also has very long historical relations with the region, and these facts need to be understood. So Russia is not going, we're not going to wake up, or the people of the South Caucasus are never going to wake up and find that Russia is not there, it's gone. Russia is part of the Caucasus, the wider Caucasus, and will remain a neighbor of the South Caucasus countries, and will have and continue to have interests in these countries. It's a question, that is not what is under question. What is under question is how will Russia manage this relationship? Will it manage the relationship as a relationship between different sovereign countries that want and seek to have good relations with each other on the basis of equality and on the basis of respect for each other? Or will Russia come into the process as a country that feels that it can dictate to its smaller neighbors? This is the big question. This is a decision the Russians have to take, the Russian government has to take. And up to now, the signals, unfortunately, have not been good. What we have seen systematically over the years is Russia accepting the independence of the post-Soviet republics, of Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, of Ukraine and Moldova, and of the Central Asian states, etc., but not accepting their sovereignty. So it's fine to have a flag, it's fine to have a seat in the United Nations, but when you want to take decisions, you come to Moscow. So this is intolerable. And we have seen that countries that have not accepted this model have suffered. And they have suffered with infringement of their territorial integrity. So we have seen what happened to Georgia, what Abkhazia and South Ossetia, what happened with Moldova, with Transnistria, what's happened in Ukraine with Crimea, etc. I think the international community took a long time to wake up to this fact, but now that it has woken up, I think that it's not going to be tolerable anymore for this policy. In fact, what we need to do is to bring Russia into negotiations about the future of European security, and the future of European security will have to take into account these problems. And within a big discussion on European security, Russia will have to understand that what it has done over the last 20 years will have to be reversed and put into a different format.
What do you think? It is possible? Do you believe that Russia, Western community will, how to say, can bring Russia to negotiation process? It's possible or not?
Let's be very clear and let's be realistic. Russia is not North Korea. Russia is a very important part of the international community. It is a permanent member of the Security Council. It is a huge country. Its economy is interconnected with the rest of the economy of the world, and Russia is not isolated ideologically as the USSR was within its own world, within its own isolated world. So modern Russia, the Russia of 2014, is a Russia that has to play with the rest of the world, which is why it must play with the rules. And I think that despite what has happened in Ukraine, what is happening in Ukraine, because the story is not finished yet, I think despite all these things, it is possible to imagine that in the future, and hopefully the near future, Russia will engage in a proper negotiations and discussions with Europe, with North America, within the context of the OSCE, particularly where we have already two processes that have been ticking along for a number of years. One is called the Corfu process, and one is called the Helsinki Plus 40. These processes allow for discussions on the future of European security. They have been held without too much enthusiasm, I have to admit, and at perhaps too low a level of technical experts. And I think it's time to upgrade these discussions to have a higher profile engagement by all the countries that are relevant. But at that point, everything has to be put back on the table to be discussed.
NATO has embargo to sell weapon and military technique to South Caucasus region, especially Armenia, Azerbaijan. But Russia is selling huge amount of weapon to these two countries. What do you think about that?
I find it very cynical, frankly. Russia is one of the co-chair of the Minsk process that is trying to broker a deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan on the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. And I can't quite understand how you can be peacemaker and at the same time you build up, you flood the region with very serious lethal weapons. And I always ask people when they're talking about the Karabakh conflict to remember that if there is another conflict, this is not going to be like the conflict in 1989 to 94. Because at that time, what were the weapons used? They were mainly Kalashnikovs and a few tanks. What we have now in the region are extremely sophisticated weaponry that if they start being deployed will create havoc, not just in a limited area, but throughout the whole region. So the people who are supplying these arms have a responsibility. And as I said, I find it very cynical that Russia is actually pursuing this policy. In Armenia, it's giving military equipment in return for, because it has big military bases there. In Azerbaijan, it is selling, because Azerbaijan can afford to buy these weapons now. And so Russia is making money out of this and is also benefiting from having military bases in a third country. So it's a worrisome development, and we need to reflect on it.
In other side, I would like to touch on one thing that Azerbaijan declared to build a NATO standard army according to its military doctrine and national security concept. But Azerbaijan is buying Russian weapon. How it's possible to build a NATO standard army with Russian equipment, military weapons?
I think the logic here is that Azerbaijan is trying to buy weapons from wherever weapons can be bought. So that is the first logic. In terms of NATO standards, if NATO is not selling arms to Azerbaijan, then it's difficult for Azerbaijan to have NATO standards when NATO weapons are not available. As I said, I am worried about the increase in armaments in any case, whether they are NATO or whether they are Russian. I think the region does not need this. There is too much tension and security in the region. There is a security deficit, I admit, and this security deficit needs to be addressed, but it does not necessarily need to be addressed by huge rearmament or armament. This security deficit should be addressed through multilateral agreements that would involve the 3 states in the region plus the international community. And I think we need to start moving in this direction.
Okay. During last years, Azerbaijan has good cooperation with Turkey.
Yes.
And we have special, how to say, effective cooperation on defense industry.
Yes.
What is your opinion about this process? Because Turkey is NATO member.
Sure.
And that's why indirectly NATO has something, how to say, role in this process.
Yes. Well, obviously the relationship between Azerbaijan and Turkey is a very deep historical, cultural and even ethnic relationship, and this relationship is one of the pillars both of Azerbaijan's foreign policy, but it also can be one of the pillars for stability in the region. So there's nothing wrong with this relationship as such. Let me make this very clear. The issue of to what extent the military relationship goes, obviously, as far as one can see, what we have is more in terms of training rather than in terms of supplies. But there are a lot of cooperation, I think, not even some, a lot of cooperation where it comes to local defense industry. and Azerbaijan is trying to develop its own local defense industry. So there is cooperation, but the cooperation is, in my view, of a different nature from, say, the cooperation between Russia and Armenia. I think this is a much more long-term cooperation rather than simply supplying armaments.
Do you see any balance in this case, Russian-Armenian cooperation and Azerbaijan-Turkey cooperation?
Well, this is how the situation is developing, and especially in the last year, we have seen Armenia consolidating its relationship with Russia, and even opting to join the Eurasian Economic Union now, and abandoning all plans to join the European Union as an associate member. And we've seen the relationship between Azerbaijan and Turkey develop to a new level, a much more high qualitative level than has been the case in the past. So this is work in progress. Now, why is this happening? Well, perhaps one of the reasons is the crisis in Ukraine made the two countries run for cover to their best friend. In a sense, this is natural, and perhaps when the situation in Ukraine calms down, there will be perhaps even a bit of easing in these very deep strategic relationships. But there are other reasons, so maybe not. In themselves, there is nothing wrong in these two relationships. Fortunately, at the moment, the relations between Turkey and Russia are good. These relations could also be positive, because Russia and Turkey may act also as a restraining forces in issues such as the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. But obviously, Turkey is less involved in the resolution of the Karabakh conflict than Russia is, because Russia is a co-chair of the Minsk process and Turkey is only a member of the Minsk group.
What do you think about Nagorno-Karabakh conflict? It is already 20 years of ceasefire agreement, but Azerbaijan territory is still under Armenian occupation, and Russia is continuing its support to Armenia. What do you think about? Is there any belief that this conflict will be solved, or sides will find solutions for next future?
I think the conflict is dangerous. It's dangerous for the region, it's dangerous for the two countries concerned, and it's dangerous for the international community. And therefore, the efforts to resolve the conflict need to be intensified. As you know, there have been many meetings. The last one was in November in Vienna. After each meeting, we hear some hope, but then after a few days pass, we're back to the same rhetoric and to the same incidents on the front line, which are killing, by the way, nearly every day, some young conscript or some civilian who gets caught in the middle. And this is tragic, that in two countries that are in Europe, that are in the Council of Europe, in the 21st century, we still have this situation. It's tragic. So we need to exert all possible efforts to resolve this conflict, and we need to intensify these efforts, because there could very easily be misperception where one side understands something wrong and retaliates against something that may not have happened, and this would escalate tension very quickly. But as you know, the talks have not been going very far, very fast, and we are still faced with a situation where the international community is expecting the two sides to find the political will to make tough decisions. Well, if the sides could not find the political will in the last 20 years, I'm not quite sure how they're going to fight in the next 20 months, except if the international community helps them to find the political will by creating an environment that would be conducive for negotiations, and for negotiations that can include also concessions. Because, let's be clear, the solution is not in the maximalist positions that we hear from the two sides every time there is a meeting in which Karabakh is discussed. Those are maximalist positions. Nobody is going to find a solution on the basis of those positions. A solution can only be found by those positions minus. And it is how to come to that minus that is the crux of the issue here. So I hope that, first of all, we need to keep the spotlight on the Karabakh conflict and on the Karabakh negotiations. Let's not hide this problem. Let's put it in the spotlight. Some people say, oh, it's very bad when we have Armenians and Azerbaijanis arguing in public, like we had in Baku during the NATO Parliamentary Assembly seminar. I disagree. I think we need to keep the spotlight on this. We need to keep focused. And the international community needs to keep focused. That is the only way we're going to be able to find a solution.
What do you think? The Minsk group is effective on this process, or is there any need to change this format?
Well, something that has not worked very well or has not produced a lot of results for 20 years cannot be the perfect solution. But at the moment, it's the only solution. Because if we want to change this, then every side will want to make its own changes. And we start talking about the process instead of talking about the conflict. So this is what international diplomacy is trying to avoid. Nobody's saying this process is perfect. Of course it is not. It's a dysfunctional process. But at the same time, it's the only thing we have. And to try to change it would mean that we will spend another 20 years talking about the process. No, thank you. So let's stick with the process. The process itself can deliver if there are other conditions around it that would allow it to deliver. There's nothing structurally wrong with it that it cannot deliver. It can deliver, but there needs to be other things happening around it that do not need changes in the Minsk process. So it's not the Minsk process that has to change. It's all the other things around it that need to change in order to make this process effective.
What do you think about NATO role for the negotiation process? Do you think any NATO role in the future in the process?
As far as I know, NATO has made it very clear that it really is not, it's not its business to get involved directly in the process. It's very difficult for NATO to get involved directly because none of the three countries is a member state. One of the countries is a member of an other military alliance. So for NATO to be involved in the negotiations, I don't think this is possible. What NATO can do, it can help in a lot of technical ways with the negotiations, because it's a military alliance, it has the expertise. If there is a peace process that develops into a peace plan, which may require the deployment of peacekeeping forces in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict zone, then some, maybe not all, but some NATO countries may be able to provide some forces for this deployment. Of course, it will not be Americans, and it's likely it will not be British, but some of the Scandinavian countries will perhaps be acceptable to all the sides. So there are many issues where NATO get involved, but not now, not in this point where we are now, where really there is no peace process. What we have is preparation to actually engage in serious long-term peace negotiations.
I have next question about democracy problem in South Caucasus region. It's clear that in all three South Caucasus countries, especially in Azerbaijan, there are problems with democracy, freedom of speech. What do you think? How this situation affects to security conditions in this region?
Well, in a way, in the same way that there was and there is a security deficit in the region, there is a democracy deficit. I think this is not a static situation. For example, we have seen in Georgia a process over 20 years where there was political turmoil. You know, there were 3 presidents, and they all came to power in difficult and different circumstances. But I think that Georgia has now been able to emerge out of that phase in its history. There were recently local elections which were deemed to be free and well organized and reflective of the opinion of the people in June of this year. And in last year there were presidential elections, the year before there were parliamentary elections, and this has been a positive ongoing process in Georgia. So it's not perfect, but it's much, much better than it was before. I think Armenia and Azerbaijan will move in this direction also. And despite the fact that there are a lot of very serious problems in both countries, different, but both serious, I think that there is now an increasing demand, not by the international community, because the international community can only call for things from the outside. But there is an increasing demand, I feel, from inside the country, that there needs to be, the process of democratization needs to be accelerated. So I remain cautiously optimistic on this, that despite the fact that we have seen some negative developments in the past years and even in the past year, I still think that the momentum will pick up because there is a genuine demand for this now at the grassroots. And once that exists, no government will be able to ignore it.
My last question about NATO-PA Rose-Roth seminar. What do you think? Is it productive or not?
I think this has been, actually I've attended many of these seminars in the Caucasus over the last 10 years. I find that this one was amongst the most useful, because we had a very free discussion, sometimes a very tense discussion. We had an Armenian delegation here in Baku, talking very openly in front of the media, as well as in front of our participants, about the Karabakh situation. We had the Azerbaijani delegation also talking about this. Both delegations were very tough in their language. I would have preferred a slightly different tone and different words, but frankly, that is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that the discussion took place in Baku, not in London, not in Paris. I organized myself, through my organization, dozens of meetings in very exotic places for Armenian and Azerbaijani politicians. But this is the first time this is happening in Baku. And we need to have one like this in Yerevan, where Azerbaijani MPs are participating in the same open way. The seminar also was interesting because we had people from civil society from Azerbaijan participating, some of them clearly anti-government because their speeches reflected a very anti-governmental position, and I welcome that very much. I think this is good. These voices need to be heard. They exist, and so we cannot ignore them. Neither foreigners can ignore them, nor the Azerbaijani government can ignore them. We need to hear them. What they say is not necessarily something that everybody agrees with. Maybe yes, maybe no. In the same way that we don't agree with everything that the representatives of the Azerbaijan government say. Some things we agree with, some things we disagree with. But this is what these events are about. They are about creating space for debate, open debate, and open discussion. In this regard, this seminar was very successful.
Thank you very much for your interview.